In today's episode, we look at the deaths of 3 individuals that was caused by Manchester police. In September 2011, Anthony Grainger had been arrested and questioned regarding the suspected theft from a police officer of a memory stick containing the unencrypted details of over 1,000 police informants. Grainger was formally cleared in early January 2012, after police found no evidence connecting him to the memory stick. Despite this, several days after officially clearing him of suspicion, Greater Manchester Police launched Operation Shire, a covert surveillance operation monitoring Grainger and his 2 associates. Anthony Grainger was unarmed in a car when he was shot by police in Cheshire in March 2012. Police intelligence had suggested he was going to carry out an armed robbery with 2 associates also in the car. Mr. Grainger had previously been found guilty of handling stolen cars, but had no convictions for violence. The 2 other men did have convictions for violence, and police saw one as very dangerous. Anthony Grainger was killed in the car park on a busy Saturday evening in the village of Colchester. Armed officers said they saw him drop his hands in a move interpreted as going to grab a gun. He was shot once, fatally. But another man in the car, David Totten, told the inquiry no warning was given before the shot was fired. All 3 men in the car were unarmed. On the day of the operation, the firearms team had been on duty for 14 hours when it was told to move in. There were 16 firearms officers, several had failed training courses, and it was argued during the public inquiry they should not have been on the operation, which Greater Manchester Police disputed. One officer, known as X7, who had directed the operation on the ground, had failed a firearms course with the Met Police, who removed him early as his performance was adversely affecting other students. Another, known as Z15, had failed a safety course shortly before the operation after 3 extreme safety breaches in potentially life-threatening situations. It emerged during the public inquiry that the officer who fired the gun, referred to as Q9, had seriously injured a suspect during a previous arrest. He had also been disciplined for assaulting 2 people. He was cleared of 10 other separate assault allegations and remained a firearms officer. This was not the last serious case Q9 was involved in. There was also an incident where his conduct was also called into question. All the firearms officers in the case were granted anonymity. Questions about Anthony Grainger's death go right to the top of Greater Manchester Police. During the public inquiry, an Assistant Chief Constable apologised for changing his records of the operation leading up to Anthony Grainger's death, and it was discovered the head of the firearms unit had destroyed his notes when he retired a year after the shooting. Ian Terry was a firearms officer with Greater Manchester Police. In 2008, during a practice exercise at a disused factory, he volunteered to play the role of a criminal fleeing in a car. Unusually, the decision made that morning had been taken to use live rounds to make the exercise more realistic. Mr. Terry was shot by an officer using a shotgun loaded with a so-called rip round cartridge. Deadly at close range. He died within minutes. The father of 2 was not wearing body armour. All his family was told his father, Roy Terry, was that he'd been involved in an accident at work. Roy Terry said we were allowed to believe it was some horrendous accident, which in the end transpired it wasn't really. The IPCC was scathing, calling the case a shocking wake-up call for the Greater Manchester Police Firearms Unit. An inquest jury in 2010 ruled Ian Terry had been unlawfully killed, and that he would have been saved if the training had been properly prepared. His father, Roy Terry, said the exercise had been made too dangerous. We got the impression that the firearms officers were more or less allowed to get on and do their own thing. The Crown Prosecution Service said there was not enough evidence to bring criminal charges against any officers, but Greater Manchester Police was fined for health and safety offences. In 2014, one of the officers who organised the training was fired from the force. The man who shot Ian Terry was disciplined, but still works for the police. Jordan Begley, who was 23 years old, after getting into trouble with the police in his teens, began working in an ice cream factory. His mother, Dorothy Begley, said her son grew up overnight. Dorothy Begley had previously called 999 on New Year's Eve in 2011 because Jordan became aggressive and threatened to harm others and himself. However, he later returned home without incident. He received tests for blackouts and intermittent chest pain, but nothing was found, and doctors asked him to return for a more detailed test. Begley did not attend the appointment. Begley was a heavy drinker. On the night of his death, in July 2013, he'd been involved in a drunken argument with his neighbours and was threatening to attack them with a knife. His mother called police. "I need the police here. You need to get here. Jordan, stay here. You're not going out," she could be heard saying on the recorded 999 call. Officers rushed into Begley's dining room in Gorton. 11 officers were deployed. Begley was initially outside the house but agreed to go inside with the officers, and a standoff developed, which ended in the police constable, Terence Donnelly, drawing his taser and opening fire. Begley was immediately restrained and he offered minimal resistance. Begley was punched twice by PC Christopher Mills as the other officers attempted to handcuff him. He was hit with distraction strikes and shot with a 50,000 volt taser while he was handcuffed and restrained by the 3 armed officers. The taser shot lasted 9 seconds, and that was from a distance of 70 centimetres. It was attributed by police to Donnelly having entered a high state of alert. The officers left Begley lying face down with his hands cuffed behind his back. An inquest later told that Donnelly had been made aware that Begley was potentially in possession of a knife. Donnelly said that Begley's hands were in his pockets, then he asked him to take out his hands to determine the whereabouts of a weapon and to stop moving. According to Donnelly, Begley continued to approach him, after which he told him to stand still, then deployed the taser. Dorothy Begley said her son had been doing exactly what they wanted him to do when the taser was used. The inquest jury's verdict said that Begley was forced to the floor and officers did not attempt to determine whether he was conscious and ignored the fact that he did not cry out or speak. When he turned over on his back, it became clear he was in distress. Sergeant Andrew Wright said Begley had an ashen colour to his face and a golf ball-sized lump on his head when he was rolled over, and his breathing was irregular. Officers removed his handcuffs and attempted to revive him using a trauma kit and a defibrillator. Begley died at Manchester Royal Infirmary at 10 p.m. on the 10th of July, around 2 hours after the incident, from a cardiac arrest. Begley was 23 at the time of his death. His funeral, which was paid for by the police, took place at the Sacred Heart Church in Gorton on the 17th September 2013. In August 2013, Dorothy Begley said she believed her son's death was due to the case of mistaken identity related to a 25-year-old man from Sale, Greater Manchester, who is also named Jordan Begley. He is on the run from prison. Begley said that on the night of her son's death, an officer had questioned her about the links to Sale. Assistant Chief Constable Dawn Copley said they were not aware of any evidence to support that suggestion. A 2015 inquest, the jury found police failings played a part in his death and said he'd been unlawfully killed. It said the force inappropriately and unreasonably used a taser for longer than necessary once he was on the floor, and firearms officers did not try to establish whether he was conscious, and that during that restraint, Mr. Begley offered minimal resistance with no need to punch him twice. The police were initially cleared of any blame, but after the inquest, Police Watchdog quashed its first report and started a new investigation, which had never been done before.